One of the underlying things that has always sort of indirectly at least been part of graffiti culture is what I like to call the scavenging part of graffiti. Since the beginning of graffiti as we know it, graffiti writers and artists have always gone to really extensive lengths to get graffiti markers, mops, and paint for the cheapest possible. And the predominant demographics of graffiti, at least in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, were people with lower incomes who were struggling in neglected parts of large cities. And although the demographics of graffiti have diversified quite a bit since the 70s through 90s, some of the values of graffiti artists at that time have stayed in graffiti culture. And one of those values that I think most graffiti artists are still quite concerned with is saving money on graffiti supplies like these. And I think that is a great value to have. So in light of that, today I'd like to bring you 5 ways to save money on graffiti supplies. Or more specifically, 5 ways to get more out of your graffiti supplies. So let's dive straight into it. I've got a lot of tips, some of which are just plain good for graffiti artists to know, and others have been ones that I've sort of found and developed over the years that I personally use to save money on graffiti supplies as well. So I've got a lot of stuff, as you can see here with me on my sort of little studio desk here. All of these things are things that I'm going to be using today and demonstrating through my close-up view on the GoPro. So let's get to it. The first way to save a bit of money on graffiti supplies is something that I like to refer to as proper mop care. Proper mop care is something that helps your graffiti mops and markers last longer, and therefore you won't have to replace them as often or replace the nibs as often either. So something I'll show you guys here. You can see this mop. I'm taking off the cap and the nib is stuck to the cap, essentially. So what we're gonna do right now is just try and get this nib out of here. And I will tell you that it's more difficult than it usually is, but this is why we do this. And essentially, when the cap is gonna eat the nib off like that, when you uncork it, the mop is useless to us. So this is where the acetone comes in. Number 1, acetone is the base for nail polish remover. It's fairly cheap, as you can see. I got this one at Dollarama. Very cheap, but it's very strong stuff. This is what we're gonna be taking advantage of today to get some results and save us some money. So, first step, just shake a bit of it onto a rag. And what we're gonna do is just use it like so. And what we're doing is cleaning the threads up. And you can see everything that's being taken off, mainly by the acetone here. The acetone does a really great job. This is gonna take a little while, and you can see the great work this acetone is doing. Like, that's magnificent. How easy this gets taken off with a proper chemical. And we're also cleaning up the threads of the mop here, just so everyone is aware. And look at that, we've pretty much got as much of the paint as we're gonna get off of it. And something here, the cap is covered in this ink as well. What you just wanna do is same thing. You're gonna clean it out, and you can see how much crap we're getting off here. We're starting to see the white color on the inside of the cap again. Haven't seen that in years on this mop, I'll tell you. So you can do that for as long as you want, really. It depends on how clean you want to get this. I was focusing a lot on the threads here, and now what happens is we put the cap on. It's on nice and tight, and well, it almost came off, but it didn't that time. So you can see that's a big improvement. If I give this a bit more time, clear the threads out a little bit more, you'll be a-okay, and you'll have sort of saved a mop nib. Some people think that when a mop nib is sticking to the top of the cap, that it's just too dirty to not do that, and they replace the mop nib. That would be a total waste of money, when a little drop of acetone would fix that problem for you. But some nibs legitimately just are used. And although you can continue to use them when they look like this, and although I do use them looking like that, at a certain point you do want to change your mop nib. And let me tell you, it's far cheaper to just change a mop nib than it is to be buying an entire new mop every time you need a new nib. For those cases, you can buy some replacement nibs here. I've said this before in a video very recently actually, but look at the mop nibs of each of the sort of best brands, Grog, Molotov, On the Run, I hate to mention Crank, but just compare the per unit prices of them and buy whichever mop nibs are cheapest that are the right size. The nib will be a little bit hard to remove, and then what you want to do is take your new mop nib and just pop it on there. Then you have a brand new mop nib. Works just like new when you replace the nib like that. That's a very easy step number 1, but it's an important one for the newer graffiti writers to know for sure. Second tip, if you have some Molotov 1-for-alls, or say something like this mini Grog cutter that has a chisel tip nib that's just all dried up and doesn't flow very well anymore, you can do what I like to call a nib reset. And again, your acetone is going to come in very handy here. And what you want to do is just make a little pool of it in a container. You don't need very much at all. And let me emphasize, this is a very strong chemical. As much as I love the smell of like paints and gasoline and chemicals like that, acetone is very strong and it's not something to mess around with. And what you want to do is just take the nib and we're going to give it a nice little bath. You just take the nib, set it in there for a while. You're going to see all that crap start oozing out of it. So this process gets everything out of these nibs that's clogging it up if you let it sit for long enough. But if you do this, you're going to want to remove it from the acetone and then put it in like a pool of water to get all that acetone out of the nib afterwards. And then step 3 of this process is remove it from the water, towel it off, and let it dry completely before you put it back in your nib. So we're gonna let that sit over here for a while and let it do its thing. You can already tell how much crap is coming out of this nib, even though it was a totally dried up nib. The third money-saving tip I have here is simply just to save your old paint and ink. For example, I put some thicker full metal paint in here with this extra flow paint of Grog that they offer, and the nib did not take too kindly to that. That's exactly why. It's all clogged up. It does not like full metal paint. So what I'm gonna do once I finish accidentally dismembering this mini cutter is transfer the leftover paint to what is quickly becoming like a dump bottle for my miscellaneous inks and paints. And this is a good thing to do while your nib soaks in acetone here. So I'm just gonna empty this out and later on fill it with something that's a little more kind to the nib. And this will help you make a concoction that gives your graffiti that unique edge that we all love. And this third trick is even more relevant when it comes to transferring paint from old Molotovs to new Molotovs. I say new, this one still has the old design on it actually, but for example, here's one. The nib looks fine, but it's just totally dried out, like you can't even compress it anymore, which you could fix by using your wonderful acetone bath. So something you can do with these as well is just take out the valve system of each, keep the valve system separate though, so you know which is the good one, which is the not so good one anymore. And then of course, all you need to do is transfer over your extra paint. This should go without saying, but make sure you have enough room in the receiving marker to take all the paint. Reassemble the valve system, give it a bit of a clean off if you want. Try not to compress the valve system. Screw the top back on, nib in, getting this cap all dirty, but still works, still works. And then you have a nice, even fuller Molotov One for All. You might get an extra mixing ball in there with it as well. And now this Molotov One for All is even fuller than it was when I first bought it. The fourth money-saving tip for your graffiti supplies is very specific, but to generalize it, I guess I could say check what size your reservoir openings are on your mops and see what nib size they are. Because, for example, this crankcase 66, the steel ball bearing is gone out of it. It essentially just leaks paint all the time. But I know for a fact that the crankcase 66 is the exact same size as, you guessed it, the crankcase 60. So now if I have a nib that is this size as well, I can just pop it on there, which I will do. You know what, I don't have an extra one, so we're gonna use this one that I just changed. You can just pop it right on there and it will work perfectly for your new modified crankcase 66 into a K60. And of course you need a cap. If you have an extra one of the K60 caps laying around, of course you can use that and just chuck this. But something you're probably gonna end up doing is having to use it, screw it back on, and that'll be your cap for your new K60/66. But essentially you've saved a mop reservoir, and when it comes to ones expensive as crank, that's a good thing to do. Yeah, this is one that'll make your crewmates do a double take when they see you unscrew a K66 and then use it like a normal mop. And I think it's worth mentioning that the same thing can be done for like a broken Grog metal head here, which I have. All you have to do is remove the threads, and then of course it would be a slightly bigger nib size that you'd have to use there. The fifth money-saving tip here for your graffiti supplies is again one that this acetone will help you out a lot with, and it is using it to save the valve systems of your chisel tip markers, as well as your Molotov One for All, uni markers, any kind of paint marker really. Again, you can take totally gummed up valve systems off of your One for Alls or whatever paint marker you may have, and just give them that nice acetone bath. I'm going to throw that in there. It should be a little deeper to make sure you don't have to play around with it, just like that. And again, you're doing the exact same thing. You're just gonna let this sit in here for however long you think is necessary. And then after that, you'll do the same thing as with the nib. Take it out. You have to let it sit in a pool of water after that. And then thirdly, of course, you're going to take it out and wait for it to dry entirely before screwing it back on, so none of that filthy acetone penetrates your precious markers. Also, don't leave the reservoirs open, or at least it's not the greatest idea to. You could leave them open upright like that and some kind of tape so they don't leak, but you could also at least put the cap back on. Just don't shake them or anything when they're like this, because in that case, there's nothing stopping the paint from just going everywhere other than the cap. And actually, as sort of like a bonus tip here involving valve systems, if you have some really clogged spray cans, you could actually take some spray cans, and if it's clogged beyond fixing, fill that little area there with acetone and let it sit for a couple days. This might break up the paint enough so that you can use like a Q-tip or something to get in there, maybe get some of the really gummed up paint out of there, and give it another try at declogging with a nail or a hairpin or whatever you may try. Fair warning though on that tip, I don't do that too often, so I would say if you're going to do that outside when it's above 0 degrees Celsius or in a garage or something, because I can't 100% say that a can won't explode because of that or something. I don't see why it would, but I haven't done that frequently enough to say that it definitely won't, and I don't want to be responsible for that. But I know I've barely scratched the surface on this topic, and I know you guys must have tons of money-saving tips to share with the graffiti community here on the channel. So feel free to share that knowledge in the comment section below and learn from others in that comment section as well. The vast knowledge in our graffiti community is something that we can all share and all learn from and better ourselves as graffiti artists. A few of you guys have said that you really enjoyed these sort of top 5 formats of the videos, so I decided to make this one that format as well. You can check out some other top 5 videos on screen now. And just as a side note, since I talked a bit about graffiti history at the beginning of this video, I will tell you that I have a Patreon account, which is linked in the description if you want to check it out. I am going to be having a exclusive video on that Patreon about a more in-depth graffiti history, or about some aspects of graffiti history, if you want to check that out. And the more support I get on the Patreon, the more likely it is I'll start producing more regular content over there as well. So I'll see you in another top 5 video maybe. Check out some of the other series on the channel. Until then, peace.